The day before Thanksgiving in 1971, a man identifying himself as Dan Cooper bought a plane ticket from Portland to Seattle. He hijacked the plane, claiming he had a bomb in his briefcase, and demanded $200,000 and 4 parachutes. He jumped out of the plane with the money and the bomb somewhere over the Pacific Northwest, never to be seen again. The FBI claims to have investigated over 1,000 people, including dozens of deathbed confessions. In 2016, 45 years after the hijacking, the FBI suspended its investigation of the case. While the FBI is no longer looking for D.B. Cooper, there is a community of people who are trying to solve the case on their own. Welcome to the Cooper Vortex. In this episode, we welcome Vern Jones back to the podcast. If you aren't familiar with Walter Reca as a suspect, I would recommend you listen to previous episodes we did with Vern or Joe Koenig or Lisa Story. Vern's publishing company, Principia Media, handled D.B. Cooper and Me by Carl Laurin and Getting the Truth, I Am D.B. Cooper by Joe Koenig. Now Vern has his own book out titled The Search for D.B. Cooper, How We Cracked the Case and Why Some People Don't Want It Solved. I've read it and truly loved it, especially when Vern gets a little salty with the vortex. Enjoy this episode with my good friend, Vern Jones. Vern, you have a new book out, The Search for D.B. Cooper, How We Cracked the Case and Why Some People Don't Want It Solved. My first question for you is, based on reading your book, it seems like you never thought that you would be writing a book on Walter Reca, or especially on D.B. Cooper.
That's true. That's true. That was the last thing I wanted to do at that point, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
So if I had a time machine and I went back, I guess at this point now it'd be closer to 15 years, and said, you'll have a D.B. Cooper book out and we'll be on this podcast about D.B. Cooper making your second appearance.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
Bullshit. Yeah. It just wasn't even on the radar.
Would you mind giving us a quick rundown of how you sort of got sucked into the vortex, I guess?
Yeah. Our story is so much different than all the rest of them because almost everyone else either has a relative that they believe was Cooper, or they see themselves as detectives and they're going through all the FBI files and stuff. We had a small boutique publishing company, and one of our editors came to us and said, I have an uncle who wants you to publish his book. And as our process is, I turned it over to Dirk Waring, our director of publishing, and I said, Dirk, talk to him, let's see what it's about. And he came back to me and he said, all right, you're going to hate this book, but I think you need to talk to this guy. And I was like, tell me what it's about. And so he said, well, it's his best friend was D.B. Cooper. And I just said, that's the last thing the world needs is another deathbed confession for a D.B. Cooper suspect. But he said, no, I think this is different and you really need to I just really fought it. But finally he convinced me, and I called Carl, and Carl convinced me to stop at his place in Florida. And we did. And at that point, I just became more and more interested. I still didn't believe that Reca was Cooper until about a year into the process. But I knew Reca had an incredible story of what his life was about. And so I was interested to just explore it on that basis. But about a year into it, I started to believe more and more that it probably was. And then, we hired Joe Koenig. Most of our evidence is verbal. It's confessions. It's audio confessions between Carl and Walter, and then confessions of Walter to Carl, to his wife Loretta, and his niece Lisa. And I needed to find out if these people were telling the truth. And then most importantly of all, they had an eyewitness that actually saw Walter less than an hour after the plane had left SeaTac, coming in after, with a broken leg. And so that eyewitness, Jeff O'Shea, as we call him, Cowboy, I just couldn't believe that he could have remembered that story. But then when we interviewed him, it was like everything came together. And we hired Joe Koenig because Joe is a forensic linguist, and Joe, he's like one of the premier linguists in the country. And he interviewed all of these people. He went over the audio tapes just meticulously over months. And he said, I think these people, they're not being deceptive. I think they're being truthful. And that's really when I said, oh my God, we really have a DB Cooper story. Because otherwise I thought we just had a spy story that, with Reca. But that was when I said, I believe this is the DB Cooper story. Yeah.
Without the DB Cooper thing, Walter's life is very, very slippery.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. It's a Jason Bourne sort of thing, but it's in real life, and it's so well documented. I don't think anyone has seen all the documents that Walter had. He kept everything. Oh my God, he kept his military physical records. He kept the letter to the CIA where they rejected him. He kept all of this stuff, but he kept 5 passports. 5 U.S. passports. He kept 1 UK passport. He kept his leather-bound KGB ID, and he turned that all over to Carl, and who now, at least the story, his niece has it, which is appropriate. But all of that was in diaries and address books and bank account numbers all over the world and stuff. It was just overwhelming that we see stamps where he said, I went into this country and that drove across the border and assassinated this guy and then collected the money in Amsterdam. It's like the passports just follow it. And it was crazy.
I think one of the most interesting things about Walt, in my opinion, is when he gets into legal trouble later in life, as already a felon. And, if you're a felon, you can't own any firearms. And he gets busted with a cache of weapons that includes like a grenade launcher and wild stuff. And nothing ever happens to him. The same with sort of the burning down the pizzeria thing.
Yeah, his son testified against him in the pizzeria, and one of his employees said he saw him practicing to burn down the pizzeria. He told Carl, he said, I can't be arrested. And Carl corrected him, said, no, you've been arrested. You just can't be prosecuted. And it was true. They would arrest him. I mean, they served a warrant and came in and got all those 38 weapons in his house. And the way Walter told it, he said he knew the raid was coming, so he got the big guns out of there. But he wasn't arrested. He wasn't prosecuted. He actually had a running dialogue with an FBI agent, a female FBI agent, in Detroit, almost to the end of his life. He was protected.
It sure seems like that. When you eventually release the Carl Laurin book, you guys, or Carl, I should say, was waiting for Walt to die to release all this information. So you have your Carl Laurin book come out, DB Cooper and Me, right?
Correct. Yes.
And then you have the documentary series come out, DB Cooper, The Real Story.
Right.
Did you know that Joe Koenig was going to do a book immediately after that?
When we started talking with Joe, and I said we had published Joe's first book. His first book was Getting the Truth. It's an amazing account of how you really discern if people are being misleading or stuff. It's really fun, especially in political season when you hear politicians, going around and you say, okay, Joe would say this. It's very good. But he did the same thing with that. So I was asking him to do a lot of work, and part of the compensation was that he said, if I think this could lead to my second book. And so we said, we'll definitely work with you on that. So about halfway through is when I had a feeling that it was going to lead to another book, but literally Joe wouldn't have published either if any of these people were misleading, or maybe he would have, because they're not telling the truth. He probably would have. There aren't many people I respect more than Joe, but as we went through it, every one of them, after he was evaluating like Cowboy Jeff O'Shaughnessy, I was thinking, oh God, if this goes bad, the whole thing's gone. That's south. If everything goes south, if Jeff O'Shaughnessy, and Jeff was just beyond reproach. He is just such a, when we first went to Cle Elum, and I was worried. I did the first interview with him, and I asked Joe, how do I do this interview? I don't want to contaminate it. And I met the the editor of the local newspaper, and I said, "Do you know this guy Jeff O'Shaditz?" He said, "We're looking at a story, and he's an eyewitness." And he said, "If Jeff O'Shaditz is your witness, you couldn't have found a better witness," which is pretty high compliment just off the cuff, and they're not great friends or anything, but they do know each other. But yeah, it's we were on pins and needles when when that interview, after I completed it, because I basically, Joe said, "This is the question you ask, and then ask this one," and because he's really concerned about saying something that would lead them into an answer, and so I was very, very cautious of that. But yeah, and then when he did that evaluation, that was really key to our whole investigation.
But early on, after, let's say even after Joe's book came out, and we've had Joe on the show, very, very sharp guy, very cool guy. Were you planning on writing a book at that point in time, or that hadn't crossed your mind then either?
No. Now, after we got done with Joe's book, I'm like, I'm out of this group. I can't stand it. I really need to get out. But then as I got talking about it, and all of a sudden Dirk says, you're going to write a book about this. You have to tell our side of the story, how we went through this whole thing. Because, when there were a lot of attacks on Carl when he wrote his book, which was really unfair. And Carl was one tough son of a gun. I'll tell you what, I only wish that those people that were criticizing him would say that to his face, because at 82 years old, I would have taken Carl's a bet on Carl at any point. But it's the whole journey was just shocking to me as we went from one point to the next, at how it all unfolded. And so I had no plans to write it, but I did feel that we just need to differentiate ourselves from Carl's and Walter, from everybody else, because we didn't go out there and we're not trying to match everything up, and we were following the evidence, and we knew we had to say, okay, this is what they're saying. Is it true? And that was where it led. And so some of the people are saying, well, there are a lot of part of the book I talk about, objections from the Cooper Vortex, not your group, but the group in general.
Right.
And
love that chapter.
Yeah. And it's like, we had to address those things, because it's like, well, why did you say that? Why did Walt say when I was trying to go out the side door? I don't know why he said it, but I'm telling you, I could have left it out. We didn't have to share.
That's a great point.
We didn't have to share everything, but we just said, this is our story. And I don't know anyone else who's in this Cooper realm who actually published things that were obviously different than what was reported in the FBI files. And it's what he said to Tina Meckler. It was funny listening to Walt, because Carl would be asking him questions, and Carl, my mother would have called him a smartass, Walt a smartass, because he just said things off the cuff sometimes. And but the other thing was, these are 35-year-old memories that he had, and say, why was it different than Tina Meckler? So Tina Meckler's memory was from 8 hours prior, right? And Walter's is 37 years later, and he's been all over the world. His life has been threatened. He is in danger. I get it that he didn't remember. 1971 was, I do happen to remember it, unlike most people, certainly. I lived through the 70s. It was my first year of college, and God, I had girlfriends I dated. I couldn't tell you their last name, right? So,
right. Walt probably had a few more drinks in the last 35 years of his life than the average person, right?
I think that's really very true. Yeah. Or even in the first 35 years of his life. Yes. Yeah.
One thing I really enjoyed about your book is it is the journey, your journey in this whole process, from sort of hearing about this and doubting it to becoming convinced to absolutely believing it is Walt 100%. And then the last part of the book is probably my favorite, because I know you. So when I'm reading the book, I'm hearing your voice in my head. And it sort of gets a little attitude-y towards the end, which I really enjoyed. Like, directly going at criticisms. I really appreciated that, and I thought it was a fresh take. I highly recommend the book.
Thank you very much.
let's jump into some of those then, shall we?
Okay, sure.
This one here, it's not necessarily something that you're critiqued for, but it's something I'm very interested in. Do you think the fact that there were 2 sketches released did damage to this case? You have the Bing Crosby and the Cary Grant. There are a couple others, but we're going to stick to those 2 main ones for now.
Right. I think there were the strange things to me. I think that the investigation immediately, not weeks later, but immediately by the FBI was very FBI, unlike FBI. And one of the things was a sketch, like you mentioned. I mean, they got a sketch from the 2 stewardesses who had spent hours with Cooper, sitting right next to him. She was lighting his cigarettes, Bucklow was. They brought that stuff. And they did a sketch from those 2, and they posted that. 6 days later, they posted a second sketch. Now, the one that the stewardesses described, and the one they made from that, is on the cover of the book. But then all of a sudden, they talked to the ticket agent and other passengers. The passengers didn't know they were being hijacked. They didn't realize that. A couple of them might have looked at him a little suspiciously. But the ticket agent, my goodness, that was a transaction, $20 out of here, you're gone. They changed the sketch because of them. People who had no reason to spend any time observing them in very casual encounters to the people who had spent 6 hours. That didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and then a year later to come out with a completely different sketch. Exactly.
Yeah, I don't understand that. Yeah, I think I do, but I that's an opinion.
It definitely allows for more suspects because you could just pick which one matches your guy.
Exactly. But doesn't it make sense that the first one would be the most likely? That was the one that the stewardesses supported, and Mucklow certainly did.
A point in your book you brought up that I really liked, the placard. So that was talked about and debated for years and years, and it likely came off of the plane, and a handful of people said it didn't. What's your take on that, and what do we know about the placard now?
Not much. My take was I was shocked that the FBI immediately said it definitely came off from that flight. That was shocking. And then they came back later and after it all died down, said, well, maybe it didn't. I mean, those fall off all the time. So it was, they could have been using it, I think, it's no secret. I think the FBI and certainly the CIA diverted the attention from the actual route. And so I just think that was another instance of it. It was a pretty big deal when that hunter found that out in the woods.
Yeah, but it turns out that comes off those planes all the time.
Yeah.
And they didn't notice whether or not Flight 305 had it on there till after they did their second or their duplicate sled test.
Right. Yeah. That was
wild. On a side note to that, I have personally seen with my own eyeballs 2 placards that claimed to be that one.
I love it. Only in this community, right?
Only in this community.
Yeah.
But really, there are 2 big criticisms of Walt that are essentially the same thing: the flight path and the drop zone. Where do you believe the plane was, and where did Walt land?
There's no doubt in my mind that now, I guess there's other explanations. I know where Walt landed. Walt landed about a mile from the Teanaway Junction Cafe just outside of Cleveland, which is over 100 miles away from where the FBI claimed that it went. I guess a huge gust could have carried him that far. It must have been a hurricane if that was the flight path. All I know is that's where he landed, and that whole discussion of the flight path. I mean, because so many people literally discount us because of the flight path, and my first reaction is, if what we're saying is we have Cooper, we have someone who confessed to it, we have an eyewitness, and we have evidence that he spent money, that he took money into Canada before he died. He took money out of Canada. We have all of that. And we have, like I said, 3 hours of audio tape with confession. We have evidence. He bought a house. We found the guy who he bought the house from. He remembered Walter. He remembered the car that Walter drove because he had just bought it. Walter spent the money. We have that evidence. So it kind of makes me think of like, all right, so Joe is the ultimate investigator, and it's like, okay, so I have this evidence, I have this witness here, eyewitness who definitely he's here. The guy's confessing to it. He definitely has it. He spent the money, and then another person saying, "Wow, what route did he take to get there?" Okay, I really think could the FBI, could the CIA have misdirected it? Could they have lost the plane? There was a kind of a funny incident that happened in 2014 when Malaysia Airline Flight 370, a huge Boeing 777 in our latest technology, disappeared over the South China Sea. How the heck does that happen in today's? And everyone's saying, oh, there's no way that they, if you follow V2 to over Cle Elum into Yakima and then go straight down to Bend, that's where the pilots from Sacramento encountered the plane at that point. So it's just a short area. The V2 makes the most sense when you consider everything that was happening. It just, there was a bomb on there. They had to figure out to stay away from heavily populated areas, because if the plane blows up, there's a lot of casualties, right? So why would you go over Olympia and over Portland? That doesn't make much sense, really. And if the plane bomb did go off, they want an airport where they could land, where Yakima has a huge airport there. That would make a lot of sense. And just, they also had the 2 parachutes. And so they had to believe that he was going to take a hostage with them, which is why they didn't go over the ocean. Without the 2 parachutes, they fly over the ocean, and this story doesn't even go on, right? Because he's gone. All right.
Although we still wouldn't know who he was in that scenario either.
Well, maybe with a parachute, we could have, but it might have shown up in the ocean possibly. But you're right. Yeah, most likely not. So it was, but we do know now, right? Who he was.
How do you feel that there's a large group sort of pushing a Western flight path, and that a lot of interest, people seem intrigued by it? Maybe that explains the Tina Bar money somehow. And here you are, I think the plane was a lot farther east than what we believe.
Sure.
And no one's willing to listen.
Yeah, it's true. And for us, quite honestly, it's like we have him. We're the only ones that have any evidence. Literally, no one else has eyewitnesses. No one else says, within an hour of the flight taking off. We have Cooper and Cle Elum. It was Walter. So for them to argue over a few degrees here or there, and I forget which FBI agent said it, but he said, we could have been searching. He said it could have been, I don't know how many degrees off, I forget right now, but well off the path, and we could have been searching in the wrong area this entire time, but I believe if you look at the FBI's actions after the thing, they weren't trying to find him. They really weren't. They did everything that the FBI doesn't do. They thought they thought the flight path went over area of Washington. I've been out there. It's really heavily wooded and everything. They didn't even set up roadblocks. There aren't many roads out of aerial that you can come out. So survive it would have been logical. They didn't do that. They didn't even do flyovers. This was a round canopy, and they drop straight down and they catch in the trees, and flyovers with small planes would have been a logical thing to do to see if he was still there. They didn't do that for 13 hours it took them to even start a flyover. They waited 5 months to organize a search party. I think you could have organized a bunch of hunters in hours going out there, because there was $200,000 somewhere in that woods. I think you could have gotten a lot of volunteers, and you could have, used the National Guard. They didn't even do that for, what was it? I think it was 5 months that they did the very first search party. They weren't acting like that. The sketch, we mentioned that earlier. The special agent that was in charge was Charlie Farrell. And he was up in Seattle. He didn't even go to Reno. He's the special agent in charge of NORJAC. He didn't even make the trip to Reno, where all the evidence was. And of course, the evidence was so mishandled and lost and everything else. But he didn't. That's a weird thing, I think, to be in charge of that. It just, and it even continued even beyond. I mean, when Carl submitted the DNA through a anonymous source through an attorney, and Larry Carr said it would take 3 days to get the results back, and it took 74 days. We were in the attorney's office, we looked at their communications, we looked at the emails, the call logs that the attorney had, and the only result that Larry Carr said was in an email, just one line said, doesn't match. And so it's like, that's just weird. That's not FBI-like to me. I like to think the FBI is a lot more professional than that, but that was how that whole thing was. But all the way through
I think you're leaving out the best part of that story.
Okay.
Where Walt calls Carl.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So Carl submitted it through David Damore, a really famous attorney down in Southern Florida, and Damore sent that to Carr, and Carr said take 3 days. But Walter didn't know that Carl had taken the DNA and actually had told him, do not take a DNA sample for me. And he submitted it. 3 days later, Walter calls Carl and said, you SOB, I told you not to DNA me. So very un-FBI-like.
How would Walt know that?
Yeah. So he was called. I told you he had friends in the FBI. They kept track of him, just like you said. He couldn't be prosecuted when he should have been in jail so many times.
And Walt, of course, isn't the only person to confess to this crime. I didn't hear Dwayne Weber's confession. I didn't hear Kenny Christensen's confession. I didn't hear Barb Dayton's confession, but I actually did hear Walt's confession. The D.B. Cooper, The Real Story. Is it 4 or 5 parts? I looked at it's on Amazon for $11. And if you're a fan of this case, of this show, of D.B. Cooper, and you're not into reading books like I am, I highly recommend that doc. I mean, you get to hear it for yourself. And Walt's story is just great.
Yeah, he is, as Joe was teaching me, as best he could. I'm a tough student, obviously, but for him. But as he's teaching me the techniques he uses and everything, it was just fascinating going through it. And he's just like, this is consistent. This is consistent, and he was looking for signs of stress, and there just isn't. Walt didn't care. He was confessing, and he knew Carl wouldn't release it until he was dead, which was important to him. And it was just, it was. I know when we first found those tapes, Carl didn't think they were such a big deal. We were going through them, and all of a sudden, Dirk looks down, and there's a plastic box, and Dirk says, "What's in there?" And he says, "Oh, the audio tapes from Carl, or when Walter and I were talking." And he's like, "Talking about what?" And he said, "Well, the hijack, just like I've told you." And we said, why didn't you tell us? I mean, we'd been there for half a day, and we're looking through all this stuff. And he said, why? You don't trust me? And it's like, well, no, Carl, this is kind of a big deal here, all right? And he was almost offended that was more important than his word to us. And it was just almost comical, but that was who Carl was. His word was his bond, and it's like, you need to trust me.
I think I know the answer to this based on reading your book, but you do all this work, all this research, the team is all in, you guys push it all out there. How do you feel about the reaction from both inside and outside the Vortex?
Outside the Vortex was quite good. As a matter of fact, that's where I think that's where my market is for this book. Is for people who are really interested. If you're reading to learn rather than reading to criticize and reading to compare to the FBI notes, you're probably not going to enjoy it much. They're almost impossible to convince. That's why the subtitle of the book was, they don't want to solve. Who doesn't want it solved? Well, the FBI and CIA, they know who did it, so there's no solving to it. The people who have relatives that they think were Cooper, or the people who have done all this research and now they've narrowed it down to this one person who they believe it was because the sketch looks like Bing Crosby. They don't want it solved unless people admit it's theirs. And so basically, everybody who's really, or not, nearly everyone who's following this case at all still doesn't want it solved because it's a wonderful mystery. It was really a refreshing story and trying to keep this in mind that this was 1971, and 1971 was a really tumultuous time. My God, it was, there was civil unrest with the race riots. The Vietnam War protests were going on. The Pentagon Papers had just been released, proving that the Pentagon lied to the American public, and they had actually expanded the war secretly, which was a big deal for the CIA. The FBI, their headquarters in Pennsylvania, were broken into, and they stole the files showing that Hoover had ordered wiretapping and surveillance on American citizens to blackmail them. I mean, it was just a really strange time, and all this under the pretense of there's this Cold War going on, and the Berlin Wall is still up, and all this is happening. So it was 71 was a really crazy time, and that was how I think Walt was so valuable.
I will say that I disagree with you about the Vortex wanting this to remain unsolved. I think there could be a handful of people that want it to remain unsolved. But I think more of what you're coming across in the Vortex is that the bar to prove your work inside this community is so high now because of countless suspects and countless confessions. And you do have, this guy pushing this suspect over here, and they're pushing that one over here. And it's like, what it would take to convince a member of the Vortex is significantly more than if you grabbed a guy off the street and presented your case. Oh, okay, yeah, that sounds pretty good to me. But I don't like the idea that the Vortex doesn't want this case to be solved. I get accused of that myself.
I don't think, and I'm not saying, I've told you this before, I don't put you in that group. I think a lot of them are, so we'll disagree on that, okay? And you're right. The bar they put is so high, it's unbelievable, right?
Right, you've got to have a ticket stub and a 20 and a parachute.
Yeah, you have to have a $20 bill, right? Yeah, that's what you have to have, is the $20 bill. And I was shocked that we didn't have one from Walter because he saved everything, except then in his final days, he had neighbors that were supposed to be taking care of him, and then relatives who went through and ransacked his whole house and took everything of value for the most part. And I'm afraid that that's where one of those $20 bills went, because I'm kind of convinced that he did have one.
That would be a real shame.
Yes, I know. I know. But like I said, when you see, I mean, my God, he kept the long underwear that he wore, that they reported, they stuck out of the bottom of his pants. We had that, so, all this stuff, that he collected, I have to believe that it was there. And I know his niece, Lisa's story is, she's also writing a book, but I know that she's gone through every part of the stuff that he had. I went through the long underwear feeling maybe it was sewn back together or something, but yeah, it wasn't there. So that would be nice. That would have. I'm still not convinced that they would all believe it. But what's funny is that you say that the man off the street. If you read Joe's book, did you see the endorsements that Joe had?
Oh yeah,
he had endorsements from federal judges, third in charge at the FBI, and prosecutors, and chiefs of police. So it's not just people on the street that we convinced. He literally convinced some very very influential law enforcement and prosecutors that we had a case that was actually prosecutable. So I would like to say that and quite honestly, the vortex, their bar is much, much higher than federal judges. Yeah.
It definitely would be. At this point, it's so chaotic that, I mean, even the suspect list grows every day somehow. It's been 51 years, and there's still at least one new suspect every single year.
Yes. Yeah. You're right. It's yeah. It's, and I guess it's really not surprising. It was kind of funny. Some of the people that I really respect in the vortex, and there are quite a few of them actually. But one of them once said, this is the profile. I was listening to him at the Cooper Con a couple of years ago, and he described what, Cooper would look like, and he described Walter, I mean, to a T, with his skydiving experience and everything else. It's like, he's right here. Yeah, so we don't expect to convince them with this, but that's okay.
Before I forget, when's Lisa's book coming out? I had somebody reach out to me like 2 or 3 days ago asking if her book had come out yet.
Yeah. I just communicated. She's wonderful. I really like Lisa. She's said she believes that the manuscript will be ready the first of the year. She's done so much research for that book. And yeah, of course, she was one of them who heard the confession, is just passionate about, I can't, yeah, it's Walter. She was much more convinced than I was, and now I think I've caught up to her, but I'm not sure.
Lisa is a great lady. I was lucky to hang out with her at CooperCon last year, and I had her on the show. She is a fantastic person, and I can't wait to read her book.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, me too.
Why do you think the FBI and or the CIA are, let's just say, covering it up?
It's yeah. People seem to think it's a conspiracy. It's not. It's not a conspiracy. It's protecting the nation's interest. Every time there's a businessman who's overseas, who's in Russia, and all of a sudden he gets arrested and accused of being a spy, or he's in China and he's accused of being a spy, or a lot of the times they're spies. They are. I mean, we never admit it. I don't think we've ever admitted, yes, he was a spy. Maybe, oh shoot, was the pilot Gary Powers, when his plane was shot down over Russia? I guess he kind of had to admit that he was, doing surveillance, but we just don't admit it. That's the way the game is played. There's a risk, and they put those people's lives in danger, and exposing one of them as, Walter had some handlers, and we identified them. We changed their names because they're still alive, and so even at this time, so the FBI agencies, we know the names of a lot of these people, and we just don't release it because we don't know what they're doing now, or who they're protecting, or who else they would expose if they were exposed. So there would be no reason for them to come forward and say, yes, that's true, because it's the greater good. That's it. Joe Koenig came up with that. Well, he coined the phrase, but when we were going through it, I said, they're just, and he goes, Vern, it's called the greater good. We all know what happens. We all know that if a state policeman arrests a drug dealer, and the FBI comes in and says, wait a minute, he's going to lead us to this other group, we need to turn him so that we know that happens all the time, and they don't get prosecuted. They could have killed people. They still don't get prosecuted because there's bigger fish to fry, so to speak. And we know that happens all the time. And so, of course, they're not going to admit it. There's no point in admitting at this point, and they're probably quite amused at all of the guesswork that's going on, quite frankly.
If you stumbled across that magical 20 tomorrow, we got it. We have the one piece of evidence that the vortex wanted.
Yeah, I don't have any more of the stuff. But Lisa has it all now. Okay, I've given it all back.
All right, so Lisa finds the 20 and something.
Okay, there we go. Yeah.
What do you think the reaction would be inside the vortex then?
I can't even guess. I would think that, I know that they all wouldn't accept it. There would be excuses that they had it, they found it, or whatever. It's there were 20s that were circulating. Walter spent it. We talked about this is 1971. No one's going through and scanning it or anything like that. And he was very careful. He spent it at places that routinely handled a lot of cash. 71, there weren't many credit cards. It was a lot of cash transactions. A furniture store, absolutely cash transactions. Cars, you bought cars. I bought my first car for cash. Of course, it was only $75, so it wasn't that much. But anyway, that's where you buy things for cash at that time, and people bought homes. My mother and father bought their home on land contract, and so it was just a cash transaction, very, very common. And so when those people went into a bank with, they had the guy that Walter bought his house from had, I think, 5 or 6 homes that he was flipping and renting, and so every month he wanted cash, and from every one of them, didn't accept checks. He was adamant about it. We interviewed him. He's an interesting little guy, and so he would go to the bank with the bundles of cash. They didn't go through them, check them. It just didn't happen. And plus it was on the other side of the mountain. If you've ever been to Washington, you know that there's Western Washington, Seattle, and then there's Eastern Washington, and the two don't mix very well.
No, they're two completely different places.
They are.
Both the weather and the people are completely different.
Yes, they are. Yeah, they are. And there's not a lot of, there is now more with Westerners buying lands there, but yeah, they're pretty separate. And I saw a thing a couple of years ago that Jeff sent me, and that someone was like, okay, we want to draw a new state line, and it goes right through the mountains, right? So
half of Washington and Oregon want to join Idaho.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it's I think they would. I'm not sure. They'd probably say no, it was counterfeited. I mean, they accused us of.
Well, they could say that for a minute, but then once it's come, oh yeah, it's verified. Yeah, okay, it's verified now, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I always wonder is, tomorrow we find out it was Walt or Dwayne Weber or whoever. One thing I want to know is how many people are going to be, I knew it. I knew it all along. I've been a Walt fan the entire time. I knew it was Walt. Yeah. And it's like, well, I could pull up 500 messages off the DB Cooper forum where you said it wasn't. That's weird.
Right. Yeah, I think there would be some of that also. But yeah, we're all in Walt, as you know. So if it someone else were proven to be true, then we would certainly admit that.
So if it comes out tomorrow, 100%, it was Dwayne Weber. What do you do with that information?
Just like I'm going to do with, if it doesn't come out, I'm going to move on with the rest of my life. This isn't literally. This doesn't make or break my tomorrow. I just know that it's true.
I believe that. You don't seem like the guy who would off himself over the wrong DB Cooper suspect or anything like that. Which I do think there are people who would be that upset by this.
Yeah. No, that's not where we're going. We're done with this now. We're going to do some more interviews and stuff like that, but on the book, just because I enjoy talking about it. But other than that, it's and I'll certainly read Lisa's book. I wish her well in that. But no, I've been just grateful to work with and so many wonderful people and meet. It was just a pleasure meeting Carl and his wife and family, and Jeff O'Shott is just salt of the earth guy, and I just blessed to have been able to spend time with them, and still consider them. They every once in a while I'll get a call or an email or something from one of them saying how things are going, and Carl's passing was a real bad thing for us. So, but it was a special time, and Joe Koenig, Dirk, and Irene and Julie, all of our crew. That was just it was a interesting time where we just learned about ourselves as we learned about this case. So,
did you watch the Netflix doc, or do you stay away from DB Cooper outside of what you got going on?
I haven't watched the most recent one. I will, but I just kind of busy. Been out of the country for a little bit here and so
Yeah, because your book's been out for a little while. Well, I've got you on the show to promote it. It's been out for months.
Well, it's available, but we haven't been promoting it. So yeah, we wanted, and some people have been buying it, and I've been getting some really nice reviews, which I really appreciate. Everybody just that is doing it. But it's available on Amazon at this point, and it's available through our website, as all of our products are. Yeah.
Did you see a bump in your documentary or your book sales from that Netflix documentary in July?
I didn't really track that. We have been getting it, but you never know where they come from.
Right.
It's it's Joe's book continues to do really well. Carl's book just kind of rolls along, and we expect it's not unusual that happens. So I'm hoping that our other products get bumped with this too. So that would be nice.
I'd recommend DB Cooper and Me, Getting the Truth. I Am DB Cooper. The Search for DB Cooper. But the documentary, I can't believe how many people I've talked to where they're like, oh, I haven't seen that. I'm like, dude, it's so good. Go get it. It's $10 on Amazon. It's a fantastic documentary. And it's the only DB Cooper confession that you yourself can listen to.
Yeah. It's there with its warts and everything. It's like, why did you put that out? Well, because that's what he said. It's well, thank you. I appreciate that endorsement. We take a lot of pride in that. That was our first documentary, and we've since done another one on a totally unrelated subject, but we're kind of going down that path.
Route to Nowhere? Is that the other one?
Route to Elsewhere, yeah.
Route to Elsewhere. Elsewhere. I'm so sorry. I was close.
You were close, but it's the people that live on Route 2 would appreciate the Elsewhere rather than Nowhere.
Yes, I can see how that would be fun too.
Yeah. It's a special part of the country, and that's So our second part on that is just about to come out too. So yeah.
All right. Now that I'm done being nice to you,
okay.
How'd the money get to Tina Bar?
Do I know how I got there? No. Do I have a theory? Absolutely. We know that that when Walter called his friend to come and get him from the Tanaway Junction Cafe after Cowboy gave him directions, his name is Don. Don drove down from Everett, Washington to the cafe and picked up Walter and drove him up. Don was kind of a petty thief, a great friend of Walter. As a matter of fact, Walter told him about the plan to do this when they were drinking in a bar. But as you mentioned, they drink quite heavily, and so Don didn't remember any of it. But anyway, he picked him up and he said, "So why are you here? What's this about?" And he said, "I did what I said I was going to do." And he said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "I robbed the plane." That was how he referred to it. And he then took out, Walter's words, a few packs of the $20 bills and put it in Don's pocket of his coat that was in the car and said, "Now we're in this together." And according to Walt and the recordings, he said that Don said at that point, the prisons are filled with people like you and I. And he was really paranoid. And so he gave Walter a ride back, and then he drove home. The FBI did interview Don as a Cooper suspect because he was a fire jumper. That's the other really un-FBI-like thing, is they didn't interview Walter at all, even though he was probably the most experienced one in the entire Northwest. So they interviewed Don, and Don became incredibly paranoid. As a matter of fact, in the audio tapes, Carl and Walter talk about how paranoid Don was. Carl said, "I want to talk to Don about that." And Walt says, "Don't even try." He said, "Every time I mention it, he hangs up on me." And so Walt had this incredible paranoia. He had a few of the bundles. I tried like crazy. I can't tell you how much time I spent trying to tie Don to the I can't think of the family that found it.
Ingrams,
thanks. Yeah, Eugene Ingram. I tried to combine the two of them. How could they had to come together some way? Don was a sheet metal worker, pipe fitter. So I thought maybe I could get to him there, but there was no connection. But the two people seemed cut from, say, maybe the same cloth, if you would. They kind of were into petty crimes without being really, it just kind of on the edge of society, if you would. And I just thought there was a connection. But what we do know is that Don, 2 months before the Ingrams found the money, he was living in Olympia. He left Olympia and went to Alaska and got out of the state completely. And then a couple months later, they find this money. I don't know. I think there's a connection there. I just can't prove it. But it is strange to me that a few bundles of money, and it was a few bundles of money that were there. The other thing that was always strange to me, and I think is overlooked a lot, is, Tina Mucklow was very specific in her description of the money when it came on board. The FBI, their notes say clearly that she described it as being bank bands that wrapped around the money. And of course, the Ingrams found rubber bands on it. That, to me, I just, the FBI's explanation that caught on a propeller and was dragged upstream and all of that stuff. I think the propeller would have been hard pressed to put a rubber band around him, as it was just to me. But I think that part is overlooked. Also, it makes sense to me that that was planted there. When the father Eugene told his son to go over, and he just scraped it with his arm, and it was right there. I was raised on farms. We had cattle, and that was where they watered their cattle in the Tana Bar, and so cattle going through there would have tore that to pieces if it had been there for very long. So I don't happen to believe that it floated there. I don't believe rubber bands stay that long in water. I don't think paper turns to rubber band over time. Any of those things, I just think it was planted there, and I believe that it was part of Don's money. I think it would degraded, obviously, for whatever reasons. But that's the only explanation I can come with, but that makes the most sense to me.
You heard it here first. Vern does not believe that paper turns into rubber bands over time.
I didn't study that in my science studies, but it was, I'm pretty sure that that's true. I'll have to check that.
I've said on the show before, I almost wish the Tina Bar money was never found, because it doesn't help us in this case at all. It only adds more question. And then it's like people are now trying to move the flight path based on the Tina Bar money. And it's just another thing in this that just adds confusion instead of helping anybody out. It's Marty Andrade on the show. He was like, if you walk along the beach and find a piece of garbage, if you have unlimited funds, you probably will never figure out how that piece of garbage got there. And he's like, I sort of view the Tina Bar money the same way.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's true.
Speaking of money, this question I actually stole from DB Fan 57 on the DB Cooper forum, and I thought it was really, really good. So going forward, let's all just pretend it's my question, but I wanted to give credit in this episode. How much money has DB Cooper cost you personally? Money and time.
There's an old adage, it's like, how do you have a medium-sized fortune? Well, you start with a large fortune, right? So, and then you do stupid things. Actually, I haven't even bothered to actually calculate it all. A lot of it was like travel and stuff like that wasn't added to the ledger or anything like that. It was just something I needed to do. And fortunately, my wife Irene is just a tremendous supporter of all my projects, let's call them, and she was right with me the whole time. It's like, all right, this is what's going to be. And so let's just do it. So we were fortunate enough that we were able to, but more than a little.
That's a fair answer. I thought about it for a long time when I saw that question, because it's interesting. Like DB Cooper stole from me too, and I thought about it that way. It's like he didn't just get 200,000. Then you look at all the time and money that others have poured into this after that, and you can look at that money and time as part of his heist. Then, boy, he's doing real well.
It was a lot of people have invested a lot of time and money. You're exactly right. And but it was in my life, it was money well spent.
I agree. I mean, I spent a few bucks. I have spent a lot of time on this. My wife luckily feels a similar way. Yeah, you go do your DB Cooper thing, but if we're sitting in the living room and I start talking about DB Cooper, I can just see her eyes roll into the back of her head. It's like, oh my gosh. And I say, do you care about this? Do you want to hear about this? And she says yes, but I know that in her head she's going, no, stop talking.
It's almost like I have to let him speak now because I know I'm going to hear it sooner or later anyway, right?
Yeah. I've got to get it out. I got to tell someone, and you're the only one here.
Yeah. She was. At the one time that Irene got really a little nervous is because we had all of Walt's passports, and we had his diaries, and we had numbers of, we had bank account numbers all over the world. We had phone numbers and addresses of his contacts that he had in different areas. And Joe, we were in an airport, and I was talking to Joe on the phone, and Joe said, "Okay, so look around you." I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "Who around you do you think is an FBI agent?" And I said, I don't think anyone. He said, "You're really naive." And it's like, oh shit. So from that point on, and Irene's like, "Oh my God," and she was, but from that point on, we actually moved them out of the house because I had all that stuff in the house and not in my office. And so I had a friend who agreed to open a safe deposit box in a bank somewhere, and that's where we kept them until we needed them to bring them out and stuff. But it just got so surreal because you knew, I mean, looking at these documents, these are real. People's lives were ended because of Walter's activities here, and it was pretty crazy. So I think that was the one time when I felt maybe I don't want to be in this thing, but she got through it. So she was fabulous.
Where do you go with this next? I know you say that you're going to put it away after Lisa's book comes out, but it's famously hard to leave the vortex.
Yeah, I don't. I really, I don't know why it would be difficult to leave. I really don't. I don't. It would be hard if I were depending upon everyone else to add things to my story or maybe refute it so that I can, and the people that are going through the FBI files, I get the community is really important to them and it's probably really very helpful. We don't have that. I'm really good friends with Joe Koenig. We'll go to dinner tomorrow night, as a matter of fact. And so I stay in touch with them, but it's not because of Cooper, it's because we're friends. And I stay in touch with Loretta and with Lisa, and so it's just. But to get back involved with it and go to any Cooper events, it doesn't interest me right now.
I don't see you checking the forums every single day like I am. I don't see you posting and arguing with people online.
No. You're right. You're right. It doesn't go. Someone sent an email the other day, and we try to respond. And the guy, he sent it to our website, but he said, "I know you're probably going to attack me," and it's like, why am I going to attack you? You can believe whatever you want to believe. I don't care. It's you really didn't affect my life today, so just hope you have a good day. I think you should read this story so that you really understand our story. But other than that, it's just have a good day. I'm done. But yeah, it's I won't be involved with those. We had enough contact as it was. But I'll follow you. I'll follow your podcast though. But I enjoy your interviews. So.
Oh, why? Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Other than hooking up and getting all your books, The Search for DB Cooper, it's out now. It's on Amazon. And like I mentioned before, if you aren't a reader, definitely check out DB Cooper, The Real Story. It's great. And I am truly surprised by the number of people who were dismissive of it without watching it. That is something that really annoys me. When it's like, oh yeah, I heard about Walt. Like, well, did you read the book? No. Did you see the documentary? No. Oh, so you read the one paragraph on Wikipedia and that's what you made your decision on?
Right.
That's kind of stuff I find pretty frustrating.
Yeah, me too. It's like the guy's like, well, the guy the other day was just so off the wall, but he said, and the app door, that's just silly. And it's like, okay. well, all right. That's whatever that means. And yeah, there's some other phrases too, but yeah, it's like, it's just not worth it. I have a pretty enjoyable life. I like this. So
there's no way you can win that argument with the random emailer.
No.
I used to do that. I used to get random emails like, why are you still doing your podcast? It was obviously McCoy. And I'd respond like, hey, here's all the information that proves it wasn't McCoy.
Right.
And then they just write, well, you don't know anything and the FBI is covering it all up and you just want the case to remain unsolved so you can keep doing your podcast forever. It's like, right. No, now I'm in this weird argument. Where what am I doing?
Yeah, that's the vortex part, isn't it?
That is the vortex part. Most of those I don't. No, I'm lying. I respond to most of them still. I wish I could say I didn't, but most of them I unfortunately still engage with. I'm not as evolved as you are, apparently. But one day I'll get there, I hope.
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
But if people want to send you an email and harass you, or they want to tell you 100% you're right, it's Walt, or I watched the doc and loved it. Is there somewhere they could reach out to you?
Sure, principiamedia.com. That's our website. We respond to all of them, but it'll go into the comments section and it just gets, if it's something that I need to respond to or Dirk needs to respond to, then we'll respond to it. But as long as it's simple, if people become, just vile, and it's just like file it away. Don't need to hear it. You'll find something else to yell about tomorrow. So, yeah.
Well, tell Lisa that I said hi and tell her to get to work on that book because I can't wait to read it.
Yeah, I really like Lisa, but I found I can't tell her what to do.
Especially if she's holding a sword, right?
That's right. Yeah. So, yeah. Nor would I try. So, yeah, she'll get it out.
All right, Vern, did we miss anything?
Thank you so much. You're always such a great host. You're enjoyable. You let me answer, and you ask very respectful questions, and I really appreciate it. I wish you the absolute best, and we will keep following you. So, and we'll try not to harass you, and we'll send a comment occasionally.
Well, thank you, Vern. I appreciate that. And, I'm a big fan of yours, and I'm very jealous of your travel schedule. So you got that going for you, too.
Thanks. I am, too, sometimes. I can't believe it. All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Vern. I appreciate it. Head on over to principiamedia.com and check out all their projects. Pick up a copy of Vern's new book, The Search for DB Cooper, How We Cracked the Case, and Why Some People Don't Want It Solved. While you're there, you can grab a copy of DB Cooper and Me by Carl Laurin, or Getting the Truth, I Am DB Cooper by Joe Koenig, and I really recommend everyone check out the documentary they made, DB Cooper, The Real Story. You can hear Walt's confession for yourself, and it's just good. We'll have links to it all in the show notes for you. If you have questions, comments, or confessions, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or email us, dbcooperpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you to Vern Jones for squeezing me in between his lavish world travels. Thank you to Russell Colbert, who canceled his lavish Thanksgiving plans just to produce this episode. Thank you to Darren Osadic for letting us play his music. I'm Darren Schaefer, and thank you for listening to the Cooper Vortex.
a story we all know about a man many years ago. Hijacked a plane, so we were told. Then he jumped into the cold. After burning and a cigarette, in the air the stage is set. Polite and kind, the people say, it's time to make his getaway. This is how the story goes about the money and the man. D.B. Cooper, they call me now. Catch me if you can. Rolled up in his coat real tight. He's got enough to change his life. Where he landed, no one knows. But from his tale, a legend grows. Was a cold, dark, rainy night. As he walked, he saw light. Held his cash close to his side. Just needs to catch a ride. This is how the story goes about the money and the man. D.B. Cooper, they call me now. Catch me if you can. Down to the bone. Look for a place to use the phone. Little cafe outside of town. He walked in, he just sat down. Met a man with a cowboy hat. He told a friend right where he's at. Into the night he disappeared. And from that night a legend reared. This is how the story goes about the money and the man. D.B. Cooper, they call me now. Catch me if you can. 40 years, the secret's out. The story has been told. D.B. Cooper's done running now. He was 80